Hi everyone, today we're going to be reading chapter 2 of Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. And we're going to be talking about how Roald Dahl uses something called alliteration. You might remember that yesterday in chapter 1 we talked about how Roald Dahl used similes. And similes are when you make a comparison between two things, and in that comparison, you use the words like or as. And we had some people write in and share some with us. Cohen wrote, I ran as fast as a cheetah. Addison wrote and illustrated the scrambled like eggs from chapter 1, glass like a bubble. She also drew a picture where it was looking like a map as they floated above Earth out in orbit and round like a balloon. Carter sent in, I am as small as a piece of algae. And if you know algae, it's a very, very tiny plant. So that would be extremely small. And I am as fast as a turtle. So I think he's being funny there. And also, I'm as fat as an elephant. So thank you to Carter for those. So let's get started. And once again, in this chapter, we're going to be talking about how Roald Dahl uses something called alliteration. Chapter 2 is called Space Hotel USA. Mr. Wonka's great glass elevator was not the only thing orbiting the Earth at that particular time. 2 days earlier, the United States of America had successfully launched its first space hotel, a gigantic sausage-shaped capsule no less than 1,000 feet long. It was called Space Hotel USA, and it was a marvel of the space age. It had an inside tennis court, a swimming pool, a gymnasium, a children's playroom, and 500 luxury bedrooms, each with a private bath. It was fully air conditioned. It was also equipped with a gravity making machine so that you didn't float about inside of it. You could walk around normally. This extraordinary object was now speeding round and round the earth at a height of 240 miles. Guests were to be taken up and down by taxi service of commuter capsules blasting off from Cape Kennedy every hour on the hour, Monday through Friday. But as yet, there was no one on board at all, not even an astronaut. The reason for this was that no one had really believed such an enormous thing would ever get off the ground without blowing up. But the launching had been a great success, and now that the space hotel was safely in orbit, there was a tremendous hustle and bustle to send up the first guests. It was rumored that the President of the United States himself was going to be among the first to stay in this hotel, and of course, there was a mad rush by all sorts of other people across the world to book rooms. Several kings and queens had cabled the White House in Washington for reservations, and a Texas millionaire called Orson Cart, who was about to marry a Hollywood starlet called Helen Highwater, was offering $100,000 a day for the honeymoon suite. But you cannot send guests to a hotel unless there are lots of people there to look after them. And that explains why there was yet another interesting object orbiting the Earth at that moment. This was the large commuter capsule containing the entire staff for Space Hotel USA. There were managers, assistant managers, desk clerks, waitresses, bellhops, chambermaids, pastry chefs, and hall porters. The capsule they were traveling in was manned by 3 famous astronauts, Shuckworth, Shanks, and Scholler, all of them handsome, clever, and brave. And that's what I want us to stop and talk about, the name of these 3 famous astronauts. Their names are, Roald Dahl created these names, Shuckworth, Shanks, and Scholler. Now, if you think about those names, it's a little hard to read all of them at once, but they all begin with the same sound, that SH sound. And that's what alliteration is. Alliteration is when an author puts two or more words together with the same consonant or the same sound. And that's what Roald Dahl does with his astronauts. They all begin with that sh sound. And it's really fun to read. And I think even if you're reading it to yourself, it sounds kind of cool in your head. So I just want to back up and read that one more time. They were traveling with three famous astronauts, Shuckworth, Shanks, and Scholler. All of them handsome, clever, and brave. So that's our example of how he uses alliteration with these new characters. In exactly 1 hour, said Shuckworth, speaking to the passengers over the loudspeaker, we shall link up with the Space Hotel USA, your happy home for the next 10 years. And any moment now, if you look straight ahead, you should catch your first glimpse of this magnificent spaceship. Aha! I see something there. That must be it, folks. There's definitely something up there ahead of us. Shuckworth, Shanks, and Scholler, as well as the managers, assistant managers, desk clerks, waitress, bellhops, chambermaids, pastry chefs, hall porters, all stared excitedly through the windows. Shuckworth fired a couple of small rockets to make the capsule go faster, and they began to catch up very quickly. Hey, yelled Scholler, that isn't our space hotel. Holy rats, cried Shanks. What in the name of Nebula Neezer is it? Quick, give me the telescope, yelled Shuckworth. With one hand, he focused the telescope, and with the other, he flipped the switch connecting him to ground control. Hello, Houston, he cried in the mic. There's something crazy going on up here. There's a thing orbiting ahead of us, and it's not like any spaceship I've ever seen for sure. Describe it at once, ordered ground control in Houston. It's all made of glass, and it's kind of square, and it's got lots of people inside it. They're all floating about like fish in a tank. Well, there's another simile. He's looking up, and he sees them, and he says they're floating around in this glass container like fish in a tank. And I bet you know what they see, don't you? These three famous astronauts are seeing Charlie inside the great glass elevator with his parents, grandparents, and Willy Wonka. How many astronauts on board? None, said Shuckworth. They can't possibly be astronauts. What makes you say that? Because at least 3 of them are in nightshirts. Don't be a fool, Shuckworth, snapped ground control. Pull yourself together, man. This is serious. I swear it, cried poor Shuckworth. There's 3 of them in nightshirts. 2 old women and 1 old man. I can see them clearly. I can even see their faces. Jeepers, they're older than Moses. They're about 90 years old. You've gone mad, Shuckworth, shouted ground control. You're fired. Give me Shanks. And I'd like to show you a picture of Shuckworth, Shanks, and Scholler. These are our astronauts. Shanks speaking, said Shanks. Now listen here, Houston. There's these 3 old birds in nightshirts floating around in this crazy glass box, and there's a funny little guy with a pointed beard wearing a black top hat and a plum-colored velvet tailcoat and bottle green trousers. Stop! Screamed ground control. Hold the phone, said Shanks. There's also a little boy about 10 years old. And we know who that is, right? That's our Charlie, the main character. That's no boy, you idiot, shouted ground control. That's an astronaut in disguise. It's a midget astronaut dressed up like a little boy. Those old people are astronauts too. They're all in disguise. But who are they? Cried Shanks. How the heck should I know, said ground control. Are they headed for our space hotel? "That's exactly where they're headed," cried Shanks. "I can see the space hotel now about a mile ahead." "They're gonna blow it up," yelled ground control. "This is desperate. This is—" Suddenly his voice was cut off, and Shanks heard another, quite different voice in his earphones. It was deep and rasping. "I'll take charge of this," said the deep, rasping voice. "Are you there, Shanks?" "Of course I'm here," said Shanks. "But how dare you butt in? Keep your big nose out of this. Who are you anyway?" "This is the President of the United States," said the voice. "And this is the Wizard of Oz," said Shanks. "Who are you kidding?" "Cut the piffle, Shanks," snapped the president. "This is a national emergency." "Good grief," said Shanks, turning to Shuckworth and Scholler. "It really is the president. It's President Gilligrass himself. Well, hello there, Mr. President, sir. How are you today?" "How many people are there in that glass capsule?" rasped the president. "8," said Shanks, "all floating." "Floating?" "We're outside the pull of gravity up here, Mr. President. Everything floats. We'd be floating ourselves if we weren't strapped down. Didn't you know that?" "Of course I knew it," said the president. "What else can you tell me about that glass capsule?" "There's a bed in it," said Shanks. "A big double bed, and it's floating too." "A bed?" barked the president. "Who ever heard of a bed in a spacecraft?" "I swear it's a bed," said Shanks. "You must be loopy, Shanks," declared the president. "You're dotty as a donut. Let me talk to Scholler." "Scholler here, Mr. President," said Scholler, taking the mic from Shanks. "It is a great honor to talk to you, Mr. President, sir." "Oh, shut up," said the president. "Just tell me what you see." "It's a bed all right, Mr. President. I can see it through my telescope. It's got sheets and blankets and a mattress." "That's not a bed, you driveling thickwit," yelled the president. "Can't you understand it's a trick? It's a bomb. It's a bomb disguised as a bed. They're going to blow up our magnificent space hotel." "Who's they, Mr. President, sir?" said Scholler. "Don't talk so much and let me think," said the president. There were a few moments of silence. Scholler waited tensely. So did Shanks and Shuckworth. So did the managers and the assistant managers and desk clerks and waitresses and bellhops and chambermaids and pastry chefs and hall porters. And down in the huge control room in Houston, 100 controllers sat motionless in front of their dials and monitors, waiting to see what the orders the president would give next to the astronauts. "I've just thought of something," said the president. "Don't you have a television camera up there on the front of your spacecraft, Scholler?" "Sure do, Mr. President." "Then switch it on, you nit, and let all of us down here get a look at this object." "I never thought of that," said Scholler. "No wonder you're the president. Here it goes." He reached out and switched on the TV camera in the nose of the spacecraft. And at that moment, 500 million people all over the world who had been listening in on their radios rushed to their television sets. On their screens, they saw exactly what Shuckworth and Shanks and Scholler were seeing: a weird glass box in splendid orbit around the Earth. And inside the box, seen not too clearly, but seen nonetheless, were 7 grown-ups and 1 small boy, and a big double bed, all floating. 3 of the grown-ups were bare-legged and wearing nightshirts, and far off in the distance, beyond the glass box, the TV watchers could see the enormous, glistening, silvery shape of Space Hotel USA. But it was the sinister glass box itself that everyone was staring at, and the cargo of sinister creatures inside it. 8 astronauts so tough and strong they didn't even bother to wear spacesuits. Who were these people, and where did they come from? And what in heaven's name was that big evil-looking thing disguised as a double bed? The president had said it was a bomb, and he was probably right. But what were they going to do with it? all across America and Canada and Russia and Japan and India and China and Africa and England and France and Germany and everywhere else in the world, a kind of panic began to take hold of the television watchers. "Keep well clear of them, Scholler," ordered the president over the radio link. "Sure will, Mr. President," Scholler answered. "I sure will." So, chapter 2, once again, we talked about something called alliteration, and that's when an author puts two or more words together or close to each other that begin with the same consonant or the same sound. And in this chapter, over and over again, we heard from these three astronauts, Shuckworth, Shanks, and Scholler. And it's just fun to say when you're reading it out loud. And this may come to your mind. This is a very famous alliteration. She sells seashells by the seashore. It's even hard to say. And you probably can't say it 3 times really fast. Now, you notice not every word begins with the S, but a lot of them do. And that's what gives you that alliteration. And here I have another one. Crazy cats kept coming constantly. Now, you might wonder why I underlined all of the C's and also a K. But that's because these C's all have the hard C sound, k, and kept also has the same sound. So here we have that k sound. Even though it's a K, it sounds like the other words. So that's another example of alliteration. So why don't you try and write some sentences or phrases that use alliteration? So tune in next time for chapter 3 of Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Take care. Bye-bye.